should still remain there. If the attitude is right, the proper act will follow. And then we discussed also how that parents who have supplied the needs of their children in early years should have the reasonable expectation that their needs will be supplied by their children in their later years. And so we spent some time talking about how that children have that responsibility to care for the parents in their older years. And this could be financially, it could be even emotionally, or just helping them with different things around the house. Maybe they're financially stable, but yet they need help in other ways. And so this definitely would be expected by parents out of their children. And so we ended up last week looking at some practical ways which we can honor our parents. And so we went through 2 or 3 there, but the first one was respecting their authority. And we spent some time talking about that, how that, their authority over us that does not cease when we move out of the house. In some respects, it changes. They don't have that direct authority over us, but there is a type of authority that they do have, and we should respect that authority no matter what age we are. If you're like me and pushing 50 years old and you have parents still alive, they still have somewhat of an authority over us, and when they speak, we need to listen, and we need to heed their authority that they have over us, and that is an important thing as we mature and as we begin getting out on our own and beginning our own lives, and things maybe our parents see things in our lives that causes them some concern, and they come to us and they start speaking to us about those things. And maybe we get angry, and maybe we might tell them it's none of your business. I think that's wrong. I think it is their business. And so we have this responsibility to honor our parents. Now there may be I know when it gets some things we might can listen to their advice and then make other decisions or whatever. But we have that responsibility to listen to them and to heed that advice if it's good advice. And so it changes, and you look at a basis by basis, or it may one thing may be different than another, and so it's just something that we have to work with. It's kind of a fluid thing, but in that honor should prevail no matter what's going on in that relationship, and the willingness to listen and to heed their advice. I made the comment there toward the end that in most cases no one wants you to succeed any more than your parents do, and I think this is true in the vast majority of cases. That the parents, I know for me, I feel like Brandy and I are our children's biggest fans. I mean, we want them to succeed. We want them to be successful. And I don't know that anyone else wants that for our children any more than we do. And so the things that we advise, the things that we talk to them about, is in an effort to have them succeed spiritually, the primary thing spiritually, but then, physically as well. Making good financial decisions and things along that line. And so, your parents are your number one fan. And, after class, Tim brought to mind Matthew chapter 7, verses 9 and 10, where, it says, "Or what man is there among you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent?" And so this basically points that out. What father, if their child asks for some bread, is going to give him a rock? If your child is hungry, most fathers, I firmly believe every father in this room would search for bread or something to give to that child to satisfy that hunger. They're not just going to give them a rock and laugh about it. And so your parents are your number one fan. And so we need to respect that. We need to honor that. We need to listen to what they are saying. And, this would be whether we're 18 or whether we're 50. We have that obligation to honor our parents and to heed what they are saying. Any other comments or anything along those lines? I know we spent a good bit of time talking about that last week, but I'd be willing to open it up again if anybody has anything they'd like to say there.
I'm thinking about honoring our parents. Proverbs 22:4 says, "Good name is to be preferred," and we should honor our parents by trying to keep their good name, or if they had a bad name, we need to improve that name.
Yeah.
Our own character.
Yeah, and that's one thing I have with some of my children. Talk to them about how that their great grandfather and their grandfather built up a good name in this community, and so it's now up to us to sustain that name, and therefore people in the community would relate that name with somebody that can be trusted and counted on, and someone that's not going to cheat you and things along those lines. So that's a very good point. We should endeavor to keep the name that they have built or build it up, like you said, if it's not a good name. Any other comments?
His own home. He's the head of that home. His father is not head of that home.
That's correct.
And it's, let's say my father was still living, and he wanted to give me some advice. It may be good advice. But I had other plans. Those plans were not against God's will. And I chose to do what I had decided to do and not take his advice. That would not be dishonoring him. If I would listen to him, see what he had to say, consider it, I think that would still be honoring him.
Yes, sir.
And yet not taking his advice would not be dishonoring.
And I think you're very, very right there. And as long as it's not going against God's will, but like you said, I think we have the obligation to listen to what he's saying. And so therefore, that's why, that first week we were talking about how that children obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right, was primarily directed toward children under the direct care of their parents, because it could be a situation where your father's telling you need to do something, and it's not contrary to God's will. And I was thinking about this, and I nearly used this example. Maybe you had a father that wanted to eat at 5 o'clock on the dot, and he told you, when you start your family, you need to eat at 5, because that's supper time. That's when you need to eat. But it's just not going to work out for your family. Do you have to 6? And so therefore, with respect, you can say, no, Dad, my family eats at 6. And I think that there's nothing at all wrong with that. So that's a good point. And I had thought about, like I said, making that analogy last week, actually, and I just didn't do it. Any other comments or anything along those lines? So we need to respect their authority. We need to be willing to listen to them. But, there are some caveats and some things that, we do have our own house. We have left, and we're cleaving to our wife. We are starting a new family. And so therefore, we as fathers have the authority in that household at that time. Yes, sir.
Before you move on, kind of in line with what you were talking about, sure. But as a parent, do you think, well, let me ask you, do we have to give our children any advice? I mean, do we have to do that? I ain't giving my kids advice. I'm thinking, do we have to do that, or can we just?
don't know that you necessarily have to, but I think there's that relationship on a basis, on certain a situation by situation basis or whatever. There may be one situation where you feel like, okay, I'm just going to stay out of it. Let them do this on their own. But if you're talking about, I'm going to go this entire, after they leave home, I'm never going to give them advice again or never going to speak to them. I think that would be wrong, because I think that we, just like with just you, mine and your relationship, I mean, we should be willing to give each other advice and encourage each other. And so there should be that communication there. But, in my own life, there have been things that have come up, and sometimes kids learn best by making mistakes. And I've got one like that. And so there have been situations where, this is not gonna, it's just gonna be better for him to learn that on his own. And so just kind of stay out of it.
I know situations, I know all these situations, where, over the years that the parent, let's just say now, have really not offered any advice at all to
Yeah.
the kids. Or at least not all of them. And there might be something wrong with that to me. It causes a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
For the child, that look around and say, well, why didn't I get some advice when I needed it? Why didn't I have someone looking out? And I'm not saying it wouldn't come looking out. Why wouldn't advice given to this person at the time that he needed it instead of just left it on to make the decisions? That's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
I think a parent should give advice to their children all the time. Maybe if they need it, but I mean, maybe especially in where they ask you something and you've got some advice and you give it to them and go on. But I just think there's something wrong when a parent doesn't feel like you need to give you advice. You see something, you feel like they should, but they don't.
Yeah, especially when that child's coming asking for advice. I mean, that's and to turn them away, I think there's some issues there, personally.
You gotta warn the children. You see, so they're headed in this direction. I don't have an obligation to do that. Just like you're a sinner,
Yeah.
they doing wrong. So
Yeah, I mean, anybody in this room that I feel like is about to make a bad mistake, we need to warn. And I think the scriptures clearly teach that. And so that obligation, I think, is even more so with our children. And so as we go through some of these other ways that we can honor our parents, I'm not sure if we got to this one or not, but just show gratitude. Honoring our parents also involves showing thankfulness for all that they have done for us. And so one way that we can honor them as we get older is to show gratitude to them. And gratitude can be, there again, just, us telling them, but actually showing them with our actions by, as we talked a good bit about last week, taking care of them, caring for them in their old age. And so this showing our gratitude, not only with our speech, but with our actions as well, is one way or two ways that we can honor them. And I think it was Dylan that brought up 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 4. And I thought I had this in my notes when you brought it up, and it was right here. So, but 1 Timothy 5:4 says, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. And so Dylan, he brought out that application that this would not only extend to our parents, but also our grandparents. But, this passage clearly points out that this is good, it's acceptable before God, and this is our obligation to do so. Another way we can honor our parents is speaking well of them. And so this would mean that we would be speaking positively about them, and we should refrain from dishonoring them through negative speech, through gossip, through harsh criticisms and things like that as we are talking to other people. We honor our parents by not speaking about them in a manner that would degrade them. And so we speak well of them and take opportunities to do that and to speak about our parents and how much we love them and how much they have done for us and cared for us and things like that. And so we take the opportunities to do that, and that is a way that we can honor them. And even after they pass, this also is a way that we can continue to honor our parents as we speak well of them even after they are gone. And then another way that the last one on my list is loving them. Children, we honor our parents by showing them love and showing them that we care. And of course, this all goes into a lot of things that we have already spoken about, but a loving relationships where children express affection and care for their parents demonstrates honor. And so we express affection. It may be physically, hugging them, things like that, but it could be just as we leave, tell them that we love them, things like along those lines. But we love them, we show them affection, and it's more than just following rules. It's more than just obeying them and following the letter of, it's about this relationship built upon love and mutual respect. And as parents, we should respect our children. As children, we should have respect for our parents as well. And so a lot can be said, as far as parents respecting their children and understanding, as we were talking about, Gerald's comment and along those lines, we can make it easy for our children to honor us through our attitude there. And so does anyone have any other ways that we can honor our parents, anything specifically or in general that maybe we've missed before we move on from this section?
A lot of the things that you just said that I was thinking about as well. Dave, his comment. In 2 Timothy 3:14, Paul tells Timothy that you must continue the things which you've learned and been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them. And that from whom there is referring back to Lois, Eunice, as well as Paul, but primarily Lois and Eunice. There seems to be here this gratitude, this respect, this recognition that for a child who has grown up in a godly household, to remember from whom you have learned these things, to always keep that in your mind and have that gratitude for it. At the same time, we need to be careful not to fall into a trap of the Corinthians where they think, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, to have it in such high regard that we disregard or that we kind of lose track of who we truly belong to. But it seems to me, the point being, this gratitude that you're hitting on, this respect, this honor for a godly parent, being raised by godly parents, godly grandparents, whoever that have taught you these things in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Yeah, and that is definitely something we should honor our parents about. And you hit, as I was thinking as well. You were as you were speaking, I was thinking as well. We can take that too far. A lot of people, especially in denominations, will, if you start speaking to them about the scriptures, will say, well, that's not what my grandmother believed. And if she's lost, then, I know she's saved. So we can't extend that honor above God. But yet, up until that point, we need to remember who taught us these things and honor them because of that. Yes?
One thing I was thinking about, I've experienced it a little bit myself, and I have observed it. As we age, we're not as sharp as we used to be.
Yes, sir.
And when I age, if I err, I don't want my children to overlook my error. I experienced the thing in the recent past where I was in an older person's house and they had a post box out. They had a big slur on it, misusing God's name. It wasn't cursing, it was a misapplication. And I pointed out that was a euphemism. I actually looked it up and showed it to them, and they were shocked. And they wanted to match Mark to erase that. They didn't intend harm, but they were not as sharp as they were 15 years ago. And I think we have an obligation to our parents. if it's in a grandchild relationship, something that they should not allow, speech, television, and I mean, you know, the list could go quite lengthy.
Yeah.
But I think we have an obligation to watch out for them when they slip mentally. I know I've slipped, and I would expect my children to catch me if I fall.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Thank you. Anything else? Before we move on from this, this part of our study here, I did have a question about, how do we do these things if for a parent or a child that's been withdrawn from? How do we honor a parent that's been withdrawn from, and how does that change that relationship, and how do we, and the relationship between parent and child, if the child has been withdrawn from, how does that change the dynamics of what we are talking about? And, I still think as far as if your parent has been withdrawn from, that doesn't relieve you of all responsibilities there. I firmly believe that you still have a responsibility to honor your parent and to fulfill the obligations that God has given to you in the best way that you can. And that may look, and that is going to look vastly different depending on the situation, depending on the attitude of the parent. You may have a parent that will refuse to allow you in their home because they have so much animosity against the church that they are just not going to allow you in there. And so that situation is going to look vastly different than a situation where you've got a parent that has been withdrawn from, but yet, they have no problem with you coming in and helping them, and they may even express affection towards you and things of that nature. And so, that's going to be a tough situation there to draw those lines. If you got the parent that refuses to allow you in the house, they've drawn the line, and they're keeping you well on that side. But I think maybe it's going to be more difficult for the parent that's allowing you to come in and to do these things, and finding that line there that, yeah, I can do this, but I can't do this. So I firmly believe that you would have the responsibility to care for them. If it's that situation physically, as far as, just actual physically going in and helping them do stuff, or it might be monetarily, I still think that obligation is there as well. Now that's going to change because, we want to make sure we do it in a way that they're not going to be using the funds that we give them to do wrong. And so we're going to have to kind of maybe figure out how that we do that, or that may not even be a problem. Maybe we just start paying their power bill or things like that we know is going to the power company. And so there's still that responsibility. And I think Christ taught that. What was it, Matthew 13, where we were talking about last week, where, they were saying, well, that they were trying to use their service to God as a way of not taking care of their parents. I think we can even learn from that we can't use saying, I'm serving God, I'm no longer responsible for that because we're withdrawn from. I don't think we can use that as a way to not honor our parents, because we see no qualification in Ephesians 6 or other passages as well, as far as if they're a good parent or a bad parent. And so that looks very differently within those different situations. And so I do think that responsibility is there. And then I'll just say what I have to say, and then I'll open it up and let other people talk. But as we swap that over to our children, and again, that's going to look vastly different depending on the child and what they are doing. And I do think that we still have a responsibility there to help them in different ways. Now, do we throw money at them and keep them all nice and comfortable? That way everything's going good and they're not having to struggle for anything? No. I don't think we do that at all. But if they're hungry and they have no money to buy food, I'm just going to be honest with you. We've sent some of our kids, had groceries delivered to them just very recently. We didn't want to send money because we weren't sure what they were going to do with that money. But we had groceries delivered. And so I think we can do that. We very recently, they were about to get evicted, and I paid half the rent, but I sent that directly to the landlord because I didn't want that money going other places. And so, there may be a situation where, depending on what has gone on, I might not do that. I might not pay the rent because maybe them being evicted might help in some other way. Who knows? But it's just one of those things that we take situation by situation and try to figure that out. A while back, 2 or 3 years ago, we had a withdrawn from child that wanted to come back and stay at the house for a while, live with us for a little while. We said no, because we just could not see how that relationship was going to work out, how we could keep separate what we needed to with them in the house all the time. We just did not think that was going to be possible. So we made other arrangements for them to stay somewhere else. We had Christians tell us that we were foolish for doing that. That was just foolish. But we felt like that was where we drew the line. It wasn't like they were 12 or 13. This was an adult child. And so, we felt like that was a line. We discussed it. We felt like that was a line that we didn't need to cross. And so we didn't do that. And so, I've used those very personal experiences just to kind of show you or explain, my viewpoint, how it changes, and what we did then. We might change depending on that situation at that particular time. And so one thing I would like to express is that as you see people struggling with these things, don't be too quick to judge, because you may think maybe they're acting too harshly. Well, you may not know all the situation. You may not know, or you probably don't know the whole situation. Or you may think that they're being too lenient, that you would never do that but there again, you don't know the whole situation. And so if you have concerns, talk to them and see before you make a judgment on that matter. Because it looks, being in the middle of it like Brandy and I are with two children at the moment, it can be vastly different depending on the child and depending on the situation. So that's what I have to say about that. I'd love to hear what others would have to say. Anybody doing any thinking while I was talking? Yeah, Brother Hall.
And I want to say, first of all, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You know, I've been through, a hard to go out through, and I appreciate it. For those folks that are out in those shoes, there's no way to say that we don't have to do. So I want you to know.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's actually one thing that we can't do for the parents that have been withdrawn from, or children that have been withdrawn from, is I was in the gospel meeting up in Alabama years ago, and that very Sunday that we were there that morning, the church at the services withdrew from the butcher shop. Of course, he was still a man, still at home, and we were going to have, during the week, a supper meal with them. So Diane and I were wondering, how it was just going to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And so when we went out, of course, he was at home, but he was in his room. And we got our food and went to the table. He came out, got his food, and went into the bedroom. And I appreciated we could have spent a little while for that, not putting us in a position, and I appreciate them. But obviously, they don't understand that.
Yeah.
So like you said, you know, if kids or if their parents are in need of food, certainly we can do one of the things clearly stated in 1 Corinthians 5 that we must not deal with or do with it. So that's just my comment.
Yeah. And, you know, another thing, as far as our situation, Brandy and I both have sat in the hospital with a child for hours beside their bed. Now, we didn't eat. You know, we didn't go get snacks and bring it back and talk to them. But we've sat for hours beside their bed in a hospital and went without some food for a while because of the situation. And so, you know, there again, it was just that particular situation. We felt like we needed to be there. And so we sat there. Dylan.
I obviously can't speak from the perspective of a parent withdrawn from a child, but I do very much appreciate what you said about how, and you didn't say these words, I'm saying these words. We have to be very careful in not making these blanket statements on how we apply scriptures and withdrawal. And I can speak from the perspective of a child who, from the second he took his first breath, was the son of somebody who had been withdrawn from. And it's frustrating to me, but I said, brethren, making these blanket applications of withdrawal, because if I, at a year old, and my parents are feeding me, you know, we're eating dinner together, okay, I'm eating with somebody who's been withdrawn from, so am I born into sin? We need to be very careful on this. It sounds absurd to say, but the blanket statement of the instruction there in 1 Corinthians 5, which I wholeheartedly understand what that passage teaches, agree with what Brother Hall just said. But I just, again, we need to be careful about these blanket statements, because when I first obeyed the gospel, I didn't really understand that my dad had ever been withdrawn from. I actually don't think the church ever withdrew from my dad. I think people, Christians who were doing the right thing, individually withdrew from him, but I don't think a church ever withdrew from him like they should have. And so I had struggled for a long time. You know, the second I obeyed the gospel was basically me entering sin. I was under the auspices of my father's house. I was 18 years old. I was still under his care. I was a senior in high school. If I had ever obeyed the gospel at any point before that, having not understood withdrawal, I was sinning because I would be eating dinner with him. And so, again, we need to be careful about making blanket statements, because it is, the scriptures teach clearly. I know I'm rambling here, but I'm having a hard time piecing this together, because it is an emotional, as you know, it is an emotional conversation to have. But children who are under the care of their house don't have a lot of control over certain things, and especially if they were like me, who didn't understand what all withdrawal entails. So, as a church, I will say this. I think as a church, as local churches, we need to do better. If we have a child who's like in my situation, of being prepared to let them know, this is the decision that you're making, and we're here to support in whatever way. That means that we need to take you into our home. We need to, you need to come eat with us at dinner, whatever. We need to be prepared to do that, because the scriptures teach what they do. And a child who is under the care of their parent has some difficult tasks that he faces.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Any other comments there? Yeah, Todd.
When raising kids is hard at its best. I'm still learning, you know, with a 14-year-old. It's good because every other day it seemed like something was said.
Yeah.
It's good, something's going on. And we need to be careful if we have ever said it. My kids won't do this or that. When they're away from you, you don't know what they'll do. I've got myself thinking about her saying that. At some point, you might have to eat those words.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful.
Very true. Very true. That's a tough lesson. Very tough lesson. Yeah, Tim.
I think what you guys are talking about are relevant to us, even if we're not experiencing it, just when we observe in one of the Huntsville congregations, a lady and her daughter are recent converts. She's a minor, but she's a Christian, and her mama died. Even so, she's a Christian minor, and she's probably going to go to the custody of an unbeliever. I mean, what do you do? I think you just pray about it, and you try all you can to influence her positively, and the new custodian try and have a positive impact, and pray that she makes it through this. But we know there's a way of escape.
Yeah.
If we can get her to look for it, and if we can help point it out with not killing the relationship with the new custodian. I mean, we're all just grappling a little bit, trying to figure out how we can make it live. But we have an instruction manual.
We do. And that willingness, like you said, you may not be in a situation where you have a parent or a child that's withdrawn from, but you can be there to support others who do. And that's I mean, that's the wisdom of God of putting us in this group, in a local congregation so that we have that support. So we have others who are standing there waiting to take on these roles maybe that need to be filled because of this situation. And so we need to be ready to step up to say, okay, I can do this for you. If this is going to make it easier for you, as Dylan said, you can eat meals at my home. And that may be that may be a lot of effort to get them there, to pick them up, or to whatever. Maybe a lot of expense. But yet, as Christians, we need to be willing to do that, to go the extra mile for these kids in these situations. And more so, I think what we're talking about here would be children who do not have a lot of control over what's going on in their lives. But as Christians, we can step up and we can offer as much stability as we can in that situation. And we may get rebuffed by those who have the authority over them, but we may not. You can be surprised at what some people are willing to allow you to do if you just ask. And we may think, well, they will never allow me to do this, but you ask, and you might be surprised. They might just do that. So anyway, I appreciate everyone's comments. If you think of something along these lines, I really, I think it was good for us to have that conversation there, because it's a struggle. It's a struggle on both ends, if it's a parent or a child. And so we need to be thinking about these things and supporting each other as we do this. And and before we go out and point fingers and accuse and condemn, take a little bit of time to ask some questions and investigate before we do those sort of things. So thank you so much, and we will, Lord willing, pick up there. In this verse, the last part of this verse, talking about the first commandment with promise. We'll focus on that next week, Lord willing, and continue our study here in Ephesians chapter 6. Thank you so much.